When my wife passed, I expected grief, not betrayal. But right there at the dinner table, my son-in-law, Jake, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Now that Emily's gone, you need to mourn, pack up your things, and don't ever come back." And my own daughter? She didn't say a word, just nodded along like it was some casual conversation. They said the house wasn't really mine. I left that night, but not to sulk or fold my clothes into a suitcase. I headed straight for the bank, because what they didn't know was, I already had a plan. The fork in my hand shook as I sat across from them. It had been 1 week since Emily's funeral. 7 empty days of expecting the children we poured our lives into to offer some comfort. Instead, there was Jake, kicked back in his chair like he was king of the castle. "Frank," he said, slicing through the silence with a voice as cold as January wind. "We need to talk." My daughter, Natalie, wouldn't meet my gaze. This was the same girl who used to crawl into my lap every time a thunderstorm rolled through. Now, she fiddled with her wedding ring like it was burning her skin. The roast beef I'd spent all afternoon cooking just sat there on the table, going cold. "What's on your mind, son?" I asked, even though that word felt sour in my mouth. Jake had never been like a son to me, just the guy who stole my little girl's heart a dozen years back. He motioned around the dining room, the same room where Emily once hosted Thanksgiving dinners, where we celebrated birthdays, where every corner held pieces of our life. "This place," he said, "it's way too much house for one person." I felt a knot in my chest. "I've lived here for 23 years. "Exactly," Jake replied, wearing a smirk that had no kindness in it. "Time to move on. Natalie and I need more room. That apartment we're in, it's a shoebox." I turned to my daughter, hoping to see the compassion I had raised her with. She just stared down at her plate like it held the answers to some faraway mystery. "Natalie." My voice came out thinner than I wanted. She finally looked up. Same blue eyes as her mother. But the way she looked at me now, it was like I wasn't even there. "Jake's right, Dad. This house, it's just too much for you now." The words hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. Like all the years I spent paying the mortgage, fixing pipes, painting walls, it was all meaningless. Like I was just some aging inconvenience they had to quietly remove. "Where exactly am I supposed to go?" I asked, setting my fork down before my hand betrayed the shock I felt. Jake leaned in like a wolf who'd caught the scent of blood. "There are senior communities," he said. "Assisted living. Somewhere more appropriate for your age." "Appropriate," I repeated. The word tasted foul. "Dad," Natalie added, trying to sound patient, "you're 67. Mom's gone. You should not be wandering around this big house alone." Wandering, like I was some lost pet or confused relic in a museum. Jake got up and walked over to the window, the one that overlooked Emily's rose garden. "Listen, Frank," he said. "We're just trying to be practical. Sell the place. Get something easier to handle. It's a win-win." A win-win. Except nobody asked what the man who built this home thought. "You could get yourself a nice little apartment," Natalie chimed in, her words tripping over each other like she had practiced them in the mirror. "No yard work, no maintenance. You'd be free." Free. They were trying to paint exile as some kind of gift. I looked hard at my daughter, trying to spot even a flicker of the girl who once sobbed over hurt animals or planted flowers with her mom in the spring. But she was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. "And if I say no?" I asked. The silence grew thick between us. Jake returned to his seat, squaring his shoulders like a man getting ready for a confrontation. "Dad," Natalie said, her voice losing all softness, "do not make this harder than it needs to be." Harder. Like my grief was just an obstacle in their little real estate plan. Jake cleared his throat, loud and purposeful. Then he said the words that broke whatever was left. "Now that your wife is dead, mourn her, pack your suitcases, and stay gone." It felt like someone punched the air out of my lungs. My wife, he had called her, like she was just some old thing I once owned. 38 years of love and struggle, reduced to a title and a death notice. Dead. Pack. Gone. every word sharp and cruel. I waited, hoping Natalie would stop him, tell him he was out of line, stand up for me. But she did not. She nodded. Jake's right, Dad. It's time. Something inside me hardened. Not shattered, hardened, like ice forming in the cracks of something old but still standing. I pushed my chair back and stood up. Steady, stronger than I had felt all week. I see, I said. Just 2 words. But they carried every memory, every sacrifice, every quiet moment of love from nearly 4 decades of marriage. I walked to the hall closet, pulled on my coat. Behind me, Jake's voice rang out, slick with triumph. Smart move, Frank. We'll help you find a new place tomorrow. I said nothing. Could not say anything. The front door clicked softly shut behind me. It sounded louder than thunder in my chest. I stepped onto the porch and looked at the house. The lights inside glowed like everything was fine. My home. My life. My family. No, my former family. I walked to my car. Each step was heavy, full of thought. I drove off without once checking the rearview mirror. I was finished looking back. Something new was forming where my heart had been, a different kind of resolve. Back in my study, I cleaned up the dishes like a machine. Jake and Natalie had left 20 minutes earlier. I heard their car doors slam like gunshots across the night. Now the silence wrapped around the house. Our house, Emily's and mine, like a blanket of snow. I sank into the leather armchair I had claimed as my refuge for 15 years. The desk lamp lit up a photograph. Natalie, 22, standing proud in her cap and gown, arms looped around Emily and me. $89,000. That is what her college had cost. Every tuition bill, every dormitory charge, every overpriced textbook. I paid it all without hesitation. Watched my savings dry up while her future bloomed. May of 2013. The university auditorium was packed wall to wall, but all I saw was her. When they said her name, Natalie Marie Clark, Emily squeezed my hand so tight her wedding band left a mark in my palm. Our girl crossed that stage like she owned the world. Later, in the parking lot, she hugged me tight, tears pouring down her cheeks. I cannot believe you did this for me, Dad, she whispered. Her voice shook with emotion. $89,000. I went through all the receipts you saved. Natalie had told me back then, her voice thick with emotion. You gave me everything, Dad. Every single thing. She had smiled through tears and squeezed my hand. You are worth every penny, sweetheart. I promise I will take care of you and Mom when you are older. I swear it on my life. Family always takes care of family. Family takes care of family. Those words rang in my head now, hollow and mocking, like a punchline to a joke I never agreed to hear. I reached out and picked up the framed photograph, my fingers brushing the glass as I traced Natalie's younger face. She had been so certain back then, so sincere, or at least I believed she was. 5 years after college, she needed help again. This time it was $65,000 for a down payment on a house. She and Jake could not qualify for a mortgage on their own. Too much debt. Credit scores that were not strong enough. The bank had shut the door in their faces. They sat on my couch that night, Natalie crying openly, her cheeks blotchy and red. Jake sat stiffly beside her, nodding along, saying little. We will pay you back, Dad, she promised. Every dollar. With interest. Jake nodded too, but even then his gratitude felt thin, like a coat that would not keep out the cold. Natalie, though, was desperate. She wanted that house the same way she had once wanted her degree. Fully. Completely. Like oxygen. I wrote the check the very next morning. 2 years after that came their wedding. $23,000. That was what it cost for the country club reception, the flowers, the photographer, all of it. Emily was already starting to show signs of the illness that would eventually take her from me, but she insisted. She is our only daughter, Frank, Emily had said softly. Let us give her one day she will never forget. During the father-daughter dance, Natalie leaned in close and whispered in my ear, Thank you for everything, Dad. For making this perfect. I am so lucky to have you. Perfect. The word tasted bitter now. I stood and walked over to the filing cabinet where I kept my financial records. Emily used to tease me about how careful I was with paperwork, but numbers have always been honest companions. They do not exaggerate. They do not make promises they cannot keep. They simply tell the truth. College tuition, $89,000. House down payment, $65,000. Wedding expenses, $23,000. Then the smaller loans over the years. Money for cars, emergency expenses, and the failed construction startup Jake swore would turn everything around. $38,000. $215,000 in total. Nearly two-thirds of everything I had saved over a lifetime poured into my daughter's happiness. Every check written with love. Every transfer made with pride. Never once did I see it as a burden. A memory surfaced from long ago. Natalie at 7 years old, wobbling on her first bicycle in our front yard. I ran beside her, one hand steadying the seat while she laughed and screamed with joy. "We will always be a family, right, Daddy?" she had asked. "Always," I told her. Family takes care of family. I believed it then. I truly did. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text message from Natalie. "Thanks for understanding, Dad. This really is for the best. We will help you find a nice place tomorrow." Understanding. As if I had agreed to anything. As if being pushed out of my own home was reasonable behavior. As if this was all perfectly normal between a father and the daughter he had given everything to. I stared at the phone until the screen dimmed and went black. Then I set it face down. Something cold settled in my chest. The pain did not disappear, but it was being replaced by something sharper, more deliberate. They thought they knew me. Frank Butler, the generous father, the grieving widower, the easy target. They were wrong. 35 years in banking had taught me more about money, risk, and leverage than they could ever imagine. I opened my laptop and began typing. It was time to see exactly what my generosity had bought. Morning came without sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, Emily's pillow still indented beside me. By 7 o'clock, I was showered, dressed in my best navy suit, the same one I wore to client meetings for over 2 decades, and fully decided. Desert Community Bank rose from downtown Scottsdale like a fortress of glass and steel. I had worked in that building until my retirement 3 years earlier. I knew every hallway, every corner, every face. Walking through the lobby felt like stepping backward in time. "Frank Butler," the receptionist said with a warm smile. "I have not seen you in months." "I am here to see someone," I replied. "James Carter. Tell him it is regarding a financial consultation." 20 minutes later, I sat across from James in his corner office. Same oak desk, same family photographs, same precise organization I remembered. We had worked side by side for 15 years. "You look well, Frank," he said, pouring coffee from a thermal carafe. "And I am truly sorry about Emily. She was a wonderful woman." "Thank you," I said, accepting the cup. The familiar weight of business settled into my hands. "I need clarity," I told him. "Specifically, my exposure on certain loans I guaranteed." James straightened immediately, his expression turning professional. "Which accounts are you concerned about?" "My daughter's mortgage," I said, "and anything connected to my son-in-law's business ventures." His fingers moved across the keyboard. The screen filled with information. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Well," he said carefully, "since you co-signed on Natalie's original mortgage and the home equity line, I can certainly explain your liability." "Home equity line?" I asked. I had never been told about that. James continued scrolling. "The mortgage payments have been inconsistent for 8 months. They are currently 60 days past due." 60 days. My chest tightened. "What about Jake's business?" I asked. James paused. That pause told me everything before he spoke. "The equipment loan you guaranteed for Carter Construction Services defaulted 4 months ago. $78,000 in principal, plus interest and fees." $78,000. I set my coffee down slowly. "Frank," James said carefully, "I have to ask, are you fully aware of their financial position?" Apparently not, I replied. The home equity line was maxed out 6 months ago, he continued. $45,000 drawn against the property. Combined with the mortgage arrears and the business default, he leaned forward. Your exposure is substantial. Over $120,000 if these defaults continue. The numbers landed like blows to the body, each one harder than the last. It became painfully clear that they had not only spent every dollar I gave them, but they had also borrowed against it, and then failed to repay that money as well. There is more, James said quietly. His voice dropped, the way it always did when the news was bad. Jake filed for business bankruptcy 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. That filing shields him from most creditors, James continued. But your guarantees are still fully enforceable. 2 weeks ago, right around the same time Natalie and Jake started circling me, laying the groundwork for what they planned to do. James, I said slowly, hypothetically speaking, if all of these accounts went into full default, what happens to the house? He did not hesitate. Foreclosure proceedings would begin within 90 days. The property would be sold to satisfy outstanding obligations. He tapped a few keys, doing quick calculations in his head. Given current market values and the total debt load, there might be $10,000 to $15,000 in equity remaining after all liens are satisfied. $10,000. From a house I had put $65,000 down on. I stood and shook James's hand, firm and professional, the same way I had done in thousands of meetings over my career. I appreciate your candor, I said. This gives me exactly what I need to make some decisions. Frank, James called as I reached the door. If you need documentation for legal purposes, I can prepare a full liability and exposure report. That would be extremely helpful, I replied. Thank you. Walking out to my car, my stride felt different. Not heavy, not uncertain, purposeful. The Arizona sun was already bright, warm, promising another beautiful day. Sitting behind the wheel, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. 3 years into retirement, and I still remembered exactly which attorneys specialized in financial recovery and estate planning. Natalie and Jake believed they had cornered a grieving old man. What they had actually done was wake up a former banking analyst who now understood just how fragile their situation really was. That afternoon, sunlight slanted across my desk as I spread out the documents James had prepared. 3 hours had passed since I left the bank, and my old professional instincts had taken over completely. I arranged everything in order. Loan agreements, payment histories, default notices, a clean, brutal timeline of financial collapse. My calculator sat beside a legal pad covered in figures. 35 years of assessing credit risk had trained me to see past surface numbers, and what I saw was worse than I had imagined. Jake's construction business had not faded away slowly. It had collapsed outright 6 months earlier. A $50,000 equipment loan had ballooned into $78,000 once penalties and compounded interest were added. He had kept the company alive with personal credit cards, turning borrowed money into reckless bets. For different cards, $23,000 in revolving debt. Even the minimum payments consumed nearly 40% of their monthly income, assuming Jake managed to find steady work. But it was the mortgage situation that exposed the depth of their desperation. Natalie's house, the one I had funded with a $65,000 down payment, was already 3 months behind. Foreclosure could begin in 60 days. And then there was the home equity line of credit, the one I had never been told about, fully maxed out at $45,000. They had borrowed against the house to cover business losses, then borrowed again to cover the borrowing. I leaned back in my chair and watched dust float through the sunlight. The numbers told the story of people drowning, grasping at anything that might keep them afloat. Jake's bankruptcy filing 2 weeks earlier protected him. It did not protect me. My guarantees were still active. They did not want my house. They needed it. That cramped apartment they complained about was not a lifestyle choice. It was the only thing they could afford while juggling collapsing debt. My phone buzzed. A message from Natalie. Dad, we found a lovely assisted living community in Tempe. Much more appropriate than that big empty house. Can we tour it tomorrow? Much more appropriate. The clinical wording did not hide the panic underneath. This was not about my comfort or my happiness. It was about square footage versus mortgage payments. My house versus their survival. I stood and walked to the filing cabinet where Emily and I kept important documents. Behind the insurance policies, I found exactly what I needed. Copies of every loan I had ever co-signed. The numbers were staggering. If Jake's business debts went to judgment, creditors could come after me for the full balance. If Natalie's mortgage foreclosed, the deficiency would land squarely on my shoulders. A conservative estimate put my exposure at $140,000. But liability cuts both ways. As a co-signer, I also had rights. The right to demand disclosure. The right to protect my financial interests. The right to intervene. Rights they never imagined I would use. I opened my laptop and began typing. Arizona law was very clear on guarantor protections. One statute, in particular, caught my attention. Under certain conditions, co-signers could demand immediate resolution or dissolution of guaranteed obligations. Conditions like concealed debts, like unauthorized use of guaranteed credit, like deliberate deception. My phone rang. Natalie again. Hi, Dad, she said brightly. Did you see my message about the tour? I did, I replied. My voice sounded calm, even to me. Wonderful, she said. They have availability next week. You could be settled in by the end of the month. The end of the month. 23 days away. Natalie, I said carefully, I need to ask you something. Are you and Jake having financial difficulties? The silence stretched long and tight. Why would you ask that? She finally said. Because I care about you, I answered. As your father, and as someone who has supported your financial decisions for many years. We are fine, she said quickly. We are just planning for our future. A future built on my house, my money, my trust. I see, I said. We will talk more soon about the tour. I will let you know. After the call ended, I sat staring at the wall where Emily's college degree hung beside mine. She had always been the trusting one, the one who believed in people. But she was also the one who insisted I document every dollar. Trust, she used to say, but always verify, especially with family money. Now I finally understood why. Tuesday morning delivered the call I had been anticipating. 8:45 on the dot. The exact hour people choose when they are desperate, but trying not to sound frantic. Early enough to feel urgent. Late enough to pretend everything is still under control. My coffee was still steaming when the phone rang. Natalie's name lit up the screen, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to a smile. Good morning, Natalie, I said calmly. Dad. Her voice wavered, just slightly. I hope I am not calling too early. Not at all, I replied. I have been awake since 6. I leaned back in my chair, watching the steam curl up from my mug. What can I do for you? There was a pause, then carefully measured words. I need to talk to you about something important. About our conversation on Sunday. Which part? I asked. Well, she said cautiously, the house situation, and some financial concerns Jake and I are dealing with. Financial concerns. Such polite language for a financial disaster. I am listening, I said. Dad, we are going through a rough patch, she continued. Jake's construction work has been inconsistent, and there have been some unexpected expenses. Her voice faltered. We just need a little help. Temporarily. $15,000 would get us back on track. 15,000. Not enough to fix the problem. Just enough to delay it. A bandage on a hemorrhage. No, Natalie, I said. The silence stretched long and tight between us. I am sorry, what? She finally asked. I said no, I repeated. I will not be lending you any money. Dad, I do not think you understand, she rushed in. This is not for something frivolous. We could lose our house. Could lose. They were already 3 months behind. Without intervention, foreclosure was inevitable. I understand perfectly, I said. But you have always helped us, she said quickly. College, the house, the wedding. You always helped. $215,000 worth of help, to be exact. That was then, I said. Dad, what is wrong with you? Panic crept into her voice. This is not like you. We are family. Family. The same word she had forgotten when she told me to pack my bags and disappear. Are we? I asked quietly. Of course we are, she pleaded. Please, Dad. Sunday was tense. We were stressed. We can work through this. We just need $15,000 to catch up the payments. And the answer is still no? I said. I do not understand, she said, her voice cracking. You have the money. You know you do. And we will pay it back. They never had. Not once. Every loan quietly transformed into a permanent gift. No means no, I said. Dad, please, she begged now, the mask fully gone. The mortgage company called yesterday. We have 2 weeks before foreclosure starts. I am begging you. 2 weeks. In reality, less than that. Have you considered downsizing? I asked evenly. Something more appropriate for your current income? Dad, you cannot be serious, she snapped. That house is our home. Our future. You helped us buy it. I did, I said. Circumstances change. What circumstances? She demanded. Dad, talk to me. What is really going on? What was really going on? Her father had finally learned the market value of her loyalty. I have made my decision, I said. This is about Sunday, is it not? She said quickly. About what Jake said. He did not mean it. We were scared. We were under pressure. Goodbye, Natalie, I said. Dad, wait. I hung up. The phone immediately started ringing again. I turned off the ringer and opened my newspaper instead. The financial section featured an article about rising foreclosure rates across Arizona. Apparently, many families were discovering that living beyond their means carried consequences. Outside, a mockingbird sang from Emily's rose garden. The roses were blooming beautifully this year. Emily would have loved that. She used to say gardens thrived when they were properly tended and ruthlessly pruned. Sometimes, the most loving act was cutting away diseased branches. My phone buzzed with a text. Dad, please call me back. We need to talk. I deleted it and poured myself another cup of coffee. It was going to be a beautiful day. 2 days after my refusal, the alerts began arriving. Credit inquiries. Emergency loan applications. Accounts where my name still carried co-signer liability. As guarantor, I was automatically notified. Free banks. All denied within hours. Wednesday afternoon found me parked across the street from Jake's construction site, watching the unraveling through my windshield. He stood near a half-finished foundation, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly. Even from a distance, the panic was obvious. A supervisor approached him twice during the 20 minutes I watched. Both conversations ended with Jake turning away, shoulders tight with frustration. Men under pressure make mistakes. Construction work does not forgive them. Thursday morning brought me to Common Grounds, a coffee shop favored by bankers and loan officers. I had built relationships there over 30 years. Relationships that now paid dividends. Frank Butler, as I live and breathe, Margaret Walsh from First National said as she slid into the booth across from me. I have not seen you since Emily's service. How are you holding up? One day at a time, I said. The house is quiet, but staying busy helps. She stirred her latte thoughtfully. Speaking of busy, we had an interesting loan application yesterday. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Your son-in-law, she continued. Jake Morgan. I kept my face neutral. High risk, she said. Debt-to-income ratio pushing 60%. Recent business bankruptcy. Multiple loan inquiries across town. She shook her head. We would not touch it. 60%. Worse than even my calculations. Family finances can get complicated, I said. This goes beyond complicated, Margaret replied. 3 missed mortgage payments. Maxed out credit cards. The full picture. She leaned closer. Between us, Frank, they are looking at foreclosure in less than 2 weeks. I nodded slowly. That is unfortunate, I said. And for the first time, I meant it in a very different way. The truly unfortunate part was this. If they had walked into the bank with a qualified cosigner, someone with legitimate assets and an unblemished credit history, there might have been room to negotiate. Something workable. But they had shown up alone. Desperate. Financially naked. A qualified cosigner. The irony did not escape me. After Margaret left, I remained at the table, slowly finishing my coffee and absorbing everything she had shared. Jake and Natalie were learning a painful lesson. Once financial credibility is damaged, it does not bounce back quickly. Reputation, like a credit score, takes years of discipline to build and only moments of recklessness to destroy. On the drive home, I passed their apartment complex. Natalie's car sat in the parking lot with the hood propped open, steam curling into the air. Another repair they could not afford. She stood beside it with her phone pressed to her ear, likely calling repair shops she had no way to pay. I did not stop. Back in my study, I logged into the credit monitoring service I kept active on every account where my name appeared as guarantor. The activity from the last 48 hours told a clear story. 7 loan applications. 7 immediate denials. Each inquiry dragged their credit score lower, ensuring the next application would fail even faster than the last. My phone buzzed. A message from Natalie. "Dad, can we please talk? I know you are upset about Sunday, but we are family. Families help each other through hard times." Families help each other. That belief had been absent when they told me to pack my bags and disappear. I deleted the message without replying. That evening's news featured a segment on rising foreclosure rates across Arizona. Young families stretched too thin, living beyond their means. Learning, too late, that access to credit was not limitless. The reporter interviewed a housing counselor who spoke about early intervention, family support, and the importance of honest communication during financial hardship. Honest communication. If only Jake and Natalie had chosen honesty instead of manipulation and ultimatums. My phone rang again. Natalie. I watched it ring 7 times before it rolled to voicemail. A minute later, the notification chimed. "Dad, it is me. I know Sunday went badly. Maybe Jake was too blunt about the house, but we are really struggling. I have never asked you for anything without paying it back. This is different. This is our home. Our future. Please call me." Never asked for anything without paying it back. Apparently, she had forgotten the $73,000 in unpaid loans I had quietly converted into gifts over the years. Their future had been built on my sacrifice, my generosity, my willingness to underwrite their ambitions. Now that the banks had closed their doors, they were finally seeing what that future actually looked like. I poured myself a glass of scotch and settled into Emily's favorite armchair. Outside, the desert sky burned orange and pink as the sun went down. Beautiful, harsh, and unforgiving, just like the landscape itself. Friday evening brought the call I had been expecting. 7:30 sharp. The moment desperate men abandon pride and reach for their last remaining option. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Frank, Butler." "Frank," Jake said. His voice carried the weight of a week filled with rejection. "We need to talk." "I am listening." "Look, I know things went wrong Sunday. Maybe I was too direct about the house situation, but we are family. And families help each other when things get tough." Family. How quickly that word resurfaced when money was involved. "Is that what we are, Jake?" I asked calmly. "Of course," he said quickly. "Listen, we are in serious trouble. The banks will not work with us. Something about debt-to-income ratios, credit inquiries. I do not understand all the financial language." I did. A 60% debt-to-income ratio was fatal in this lending environment. "It can be confusing," I said evenly. "Frank, we just need $15,000. Temporary. We will sign paperwork, pay interest, whatever you want. But if we do not get help soon, we lose everything." Everything. Their house. Their credit. Their long-held assumption that my generosity had no limits. "As I recall," I said, "you told me to pack my suitcases and never return." Silence stretched across the line. That was a misunderstanding, he said finally. I was stressed, worried about your safety. You rattling around alone in such a big house. Rattling around. Even his apology dripped with condescension. Interesting interpretation, I replied. Frank, please, he pressed. Emily would have wanted you to help us. She loved Natalie, loved our family. She would not want to see us lose our home. They were using my dead wife as leverage. The audacity was almost impressive. Emily is gone, Jake, I said quietly. I make my own decisions now. What happened to you? He demanded, desperation bleeding through his forced composure. This is not the Frank I know. The Frank who paid for college, for the wedding, for the down payment. The Frank who wrote checks without asking questions. That man stopped existing Sunday evening, I said. Perhaps you never truly knew me. This is about Sunday, is it not? Panic crept into his voice. About what I said. Frank, I apologize. I was wrong. I should never have suggested you leave your house. Your apology is noted. Then you will help us. No. Why not? The word exploded through the receiver. You have the money. You know you do. 300,000 in savings, maybe more. What is 15,000 to you? 300,000. Uncomfortably close to my actual balance. How do you know my account balance, Jake? I asked. Natalie mentioned it, he said quickly. Look, that is not the point. The point is you can save us, and you are choosing not to. Choosing not to. As if generosity were an obligation instead of a gift. You are right, I said calmly. I am choosing. You son of, he stopped himself, breathing hard. Frank, I am trying to be respectful here, but you are pushing me. And that was when I knew. They had never seen me as a father. Only as a resource. We are talking about your daughter's future, Jake pressed. About your future grandchildren. About what they will inherit. Grandchildren. Children who did not exist. Futures imagined by a daughter who had already tried to erase me from her life. Are you threatening me, Jake? I asked calmly. I am explaining reality, he snapped. If we lose this house, if our credit is ruined, if we are forced into bankruptcy, that affects everyone, including you. Everyone, except the man they had tried to exile. I think this conversation is over, I said. Wait, he rushed in. Just tell me why. Why will you not help us? What did we do to deserve this? What did they do? They had mistaken my grief for weakness, my love for vulnerability, my generosity for guaranteed income. They had turned my wife's funeral into a bargaining chip. Perhaps, I said evenly, you should ask yourself why your loan applications keep getting rejected. Silence. Longer this time. When Jake finally spoke again, his tone had changed. Suspicion crept in where arrogance once lived. What do you mean by that? Exactly what I said, I replied. Good evening, Jake. Frank, do not you dare hang up. I ended the call and shut off the ringer. Outside my study window, the desert sky burned crimson and gold as the sun went down. Beautiful, severe, unforgiving, much like justice. My phone buzzed with a text message. This is not over, old man. Not by a long shot. I smiled and deleted it. He was right about one thing. This was only the beginning. Saturday morning brought clarity. Jake's threat crossed a line, and lines, once crossed, demanded response. If he wanted to play hardball, I would show him what professional-level strategy looked like. My first stop was the public library's Business Research Center. 35 years in banking had taught me one immutable truth. Every company leaves a paper trail. Desert Vista Construction Limited Liability Company would be no different. The Arizona Corporation Commission database revealed several points of interest. Late payment notices filed by 3 subcontractors over the last 4 months. Cash flow disruptions. Permit delays on 2 municipal projects. A workers' compensation claim still under investigation. I printed everything. Moving into construction industry databases sharpened the picture. Rising material costs. Labor shortages. Delayed municipal payments. Small contractors across Arizona were struggling. Desert Vista was not treading water. It was barely keeping its head above the surface. Later that morning, I stopped at Common Ground's coffee shop and ran into Bob Henley, a former client who had retired from the city planning department. We exchanged condolences about Emily's memorial service, then drifted naturally into industry talk. "Construction is brutal right now," Bob said, stirring his coffee. "Half these small firms are one bad project away from collapse." "I imagine permit compliance matters more than ever," I said casually. "Absolutely," he replied. "With safety regulations, insurance requirements, and worker protection laws, one violation can shut a site down for weeks." "Interesting." I made a mental note. "Any companies giving your department trouble?" I asked. Bob lowered his voice. "Between you and me, there have been some concerns about Desert Vista Construction. Nothing actionable yet, but their safety protocols are loose, and their insurance paperwork has been late more than once." Loose safety protocols, late insurance documentation. In construction, those were not minor issues. They were the line between profit and regulatory disaster. Back home, I spent Sunday morning cross-checking public records with industry reports. The situation was worse than I initially believed. Desert Vista owed $67,000 to a concrete supplier, $42,000 to an electrical subcontractor, 3 missed insurance premium payments. Then came the most interesting discovery. The Better Business Bureau database showed 2 complaints filed within the past month. Incomplete work, payment disputes. Not enough to destroy a company, but enough to draw scrutiny. I pulled out my old contact list. Retirement had not erased professional goodwill. David Marsh at Southwest Insurance Group handled workers' compensation policies for most regional contractors. Sarah Adams at Municipal Licensing had processed permits for decades. Both owed me favors from my banking days. By Sunday afternoon, I had made discreet inquiries with 3 different agencies. No accusations, no threats, just concerned, professional questions about compliance and risk exposure. The kind of due diligence any experienced analyst would conduct. "David," I said to the insurance executive, "I am doing some informal consulting. Desert Vista Construction came up as a potential partner. Their coverage appears adequate, but I wanted to verify payment status and claims history." He hesitated. "Between us, Frank, they are on thin ice. 2 late payments already. 1 more missed premium, and we are obligated to notify their bonding company. Coverage lapse. In construction, that meant immediate shutdown and serious liability exposure." Sarah Adams was equally forthcoming. "Desert Vista has had permit problems lately," she said. "Nothing catastrophic, but concerning. Their foreman submitted incomplete safety plans twice last month." Incomplete safety plans. Another red flag regulators never ignored. That evening, I sat at my desk and pulled everything together. Desert Vista Construction was a company under severe strain, walking a narrow path between survival and collapse. They needed every permit approved, every inspection clean, every project uninterrupted. Unfortunately for Jake, companies operating under pressure often found that small issues became large catastrophes, especially when those issues received appropriate regulatory attention. I opened my laptop and drafted a short, carefully worded email to Bob Henley. Professional, neutral, curious. The first move. Bob had clearly enjoyed our conversation over coffee. The email I sent him was simple, professional, and carefully neutral. I mentioned that he might find certain industry compliance reports worth reviewing, especially the sections related to construction safety protocols. I emphasized that the information was purely informational, nothing more. Attached were publicly available records tied to Desert Vista Construction. Permit delays. Safety documentation inconsistencies. No confidential data. No exaggeration. Just facts, organized cleanly, presented clearly, and framed in a way that made their implications impossible to ignore. The message would land in Bob's inbox Monday morning. He would review it, then likely pass it along to former colleagues in planning, inspections, and safety oversight. Nothing improper. just professionals sharing concerns related to public welfare. Within days, Desert Vista Construction would feel the weight of scrutiny. Jake had threatened me. Now he was about to learn the difference between noise and influence. Monday afternoon delivered the first confirmation. At 3:15, Jake's pickup truck rolled into their driveway, nearly 2 hours earlier than his usual return. I watched from my rearview mirror while parked at the corner coffee stand. He did not get out right away. For almost 10 minutes, he sat there gripping the steering wheel, unmoving. When he finally stepped out, his shoulders sagged with the unmistakable posture of a man whose world had just collapsed. The regulatory pressure had moved faster than I expected. Desert Vista's permit problems had escalated into a full project shutdown. Work was halted. Crews were sent home. Layoffs followed immediately. Jake disappeared inside the house. Within minutes, raised voices spilled through the thin walls and open windows. Even from the street, the chaos was obvious. Wild gestures flashed through the front window. Pacing so aggressive it felt like the house itself vibrated with tension. Tuesday morning brought the scream. I had positioned myself at the neighborhood park, pretending to read the paper while keeping their home within view. The sound cut through the desert air like shattered glass. Raw disbelief. Total collapse. Jake had finally confessed. $78,000 in concealed business debt. The bankruptcy filing. Months of lies propping up a lifestyle already beyond its limits. Through the kitchen window, I saw Natalie's silhouette, arms slashing through the air, movements sharp and frantic. Jake stood rigid, palms open in what looked like a desperate attempt to justify the unjustifiable. It unfolded like a silent film, rage, betrayal, and shock without audible dialogue. Natalie burst outside, phone pressed to her ear. Her first call lasted 3 minutes. Likely her sister in California. The second was shorter, more frantic. By the fourth call, she was pacing the driveway, her voice carrying across the quiet morning. "Mom, I know it is early, but we need help. Real help. Jake lost his job. And no, there is more. Much more." She went back inside, then reappeared 10 minutes later, phone already to her ear again. The pattern continued all morning. One call after another. Desperate fishing lines cast toward anyone who might still offer financial rescue. By noon, Jake had made 2 trips to the liquor store, then one to what appeared to be a pawn shop. He returned carrying small boxes, selling possessions. The classic final move of people drowning in debt. I relocated to the public library parking lot for the afternoon, maintaining visual contact while appearing to run ordinary errands. Their collapse was accelerating faster than even my most optimistic projections. Around 2 o'clock, Natalie's friend Rebecca arrived. She stayed about an hour. Through the open door, I heard fragments, crying, pleading, whispered advice, the hollow sound of someone realizing their safety net had vanished. When Rebecca left, her expression held that familiar mix of sympathy and relief. The look of someone grateful not to be asked for money they did not have. Evening brought the true breakdown. Their arguments spilled onto the front porch, voices raised beyond any pretense of privacy. I stood in my own yard, calmly watering Emily's roses, listening to every bitter word. "You bankrupted us," Natalie shouted, her voice cracking from exhaustion and fury. $78,000, Jake. How do you hide $78,000? "I was trying to save the business," he yelled back. "Everything I did was for our future." "Our future?" she snapped. "What future? We lose the house in 6 days. 6 days. Your father could fix this with one phone call." "My father?" Natalie laughed, hollow and sharp. "You told him to pack his bags and never come back. You really think he forgot that?" Jake's reply was drowned out by the front door slamming shut. Natalie stayed on the porch, collapsed into herself, sobbing with the raw despair of someone whose entire world had imploded in less than 24 hours. I rolled up the garden hose and went inside. The day's intelligence gathering had been more productive than expected. My strategy was working. Their marriage, already weakened by financial strain, was unraveling under the weight of betrayal and hopelessness. Phase 2 was complete. They had lost income, destroyed their credit, and now, the foundation of their relationship, trust, was collapsing alongside everything else. Phase 3 would begin tomorrow. That night, I poured myself a scotch and sat quietly, appreciating the elegant precision of watching people experience the consequences of their own actions. The desert sky burned crimson and gold as the sun set. Justice, it seemed, favored beautiful colors. Wednesday evening brought the visitors I had been expecting. Through the front window, I watched them approach. Natalie clung to Jake's arm for balance. Both moved with the slow, defeated shuffle of people who had exhausted every option. The doorbell rang once. Tentative, almost apologetic. I took my time before answering. Adjusted my tie. Checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. When dealing with desperation, timing mattered. "Dad," Natalie said when I opened the door. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "Thank you for coming," I replied evenly. "Natalie." "Jake." I stepped aside without warmth. "Please, come in." They followed me into the living room. I took my usual chair. Emily's chair beside me remained empty, a silent reminder of everything they had already taken. Natalie and Jake perched on the edge of the couch, stiff and uncomfortable, like children waiting outside a principal's office. I folded my hands and looked at them calmly. "I assume you have something you would like to discuss." Natalie's composure shattered almost instantly. "Dad, we are in real trouble," she said, her voice trembling. "I know we messed up. We said things we should not have. But they were mistakes." "Mistakes," I repeated calmly, letting the word hang in the air. "That is an interesting way to frame it." Jake cleared his throat. When he spoke, it was with the strained tone of a man forcing humility down his own throat. "Frank, I owe you an apology. What I said at dinner, about you packing your bags, that was completely out of line. I was under a lot of stress about our finances, and I took it out on you." "Our finances." Even now, he was softening the truth. "You were stressed," I agreed evenly. "About what exactly?" His jaw tightened. The question cornered him, stripping away the option to hide. "Business problems," he admitted. "Debt. Things I should have talked about with Natalie sooner." "How much debt?" I asked. The silence grew uncomfortable. Natalie turned toward him, pain flickering across her face. Even now, he hesitated. $78,000, Jake finally said. "That is significant," I replied, keeping my tone professionally neutral. "And your employment status?" "I lost my job," he said quietly. "Monday. Industry downturn." Industry downturn, not regulatory scrutiny triggered by concerned professionals sharing public safety information. Jake still had no idea how deep the water really was. "Dad, please," Natalie sobbed. "We lose the house in 5 days. I have called everyone. My sister, friends from college, anyone who might help. Nobody has that kind of money available this fast." Nobody except the father she had watched be pushed out of his own home. "And so you came to me," I said. "Your family." Tears streamed down her face. "You are all I have left since Mom died. She would have wanted us to stick together, to work through this." They were invoking my wife now. "Your mother believed in honesty above everything," I said quietly. "She kept meticulous records. She demanded transparency in all financial matters." Natalie did not catch the warning in my words. Jake did. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Dad," Natalie whispered, "I know I have not been perfect, but I am still your little girl. Please do not abandon me when I need you most." Your little girl. The same daughter who had sat silently while her husband told me to disappear. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" I asked. "Lend us money," Jake said quickly. 40,000 would cover the mortgage arrears and give us time to stabilize. Find work. Regroup. $40,000. Not salvation, just delay. "That is a substantial request," I said. "We will repay you," Natalie insisted. "With interest. Any terms you want." We will sign legal documents. Put the house up as collateral. The house, the one I had already funded, the mortgage I had already guaranteed. I see, I said. I leaned back and studied them. Two people stripped of confidence, clinging to hope they no longer controlled. And if I refuse? I asked. The question filled the room like smoke. Natalie's shoulders shook as she cried silently. Jake stared at the floor, pride and panic fighting for dominance. Then we lose everything, she whispered. Our home, our marriage, our future. A future built on deception, sustained by borrowed money, now collapsing under consequences they never expected. I stood and walked to the window overlooking Emily's rose garden. The roses were blooming beautifully. She always said healthy growth required proper pruning. You have put yourselves in a difficult position, I said. Behind me, Natalie sobbed quietly. Jake's breathing was heavy and uneven. They were waiting for mercy. For the first time in weeks, I felt something deeper than anger. I felt justice. Before I consider anything, I said, turning back to them, you need to understand how you arrived here. Natalie wiped her eyes, confusion breaking through her tears. What do you mean? I mean that very little of what happened to you was accidental. I walked to my desk and opened the center drawer. Inside were carefully organized records of every strategic step I had taken. Jake's face changed as I removed a thick manila folder. Let me show you something. I spread the documents across the coffee table. Monday, March 18th, I said. I met with my former colleague James Carter at Desert Community Bank. Jake went pale. You did what? As co-signer on your loans, I had full legal authority to review your financial exposure. James was thorough. I slid the reports forward. $78,000 in business debt. 3 months behind on your mortgage. Credit cards carrying balances near 60% of available limits. Natalie stared at the papers. Dad, I do not understand. I conducted a professional risk assessment, I said. 23 years in banking taught me how to identify accounts beyond recovery. I turned another page. Your debt-to-income ratio was approaching 65%. Statistically unsustainable. You were analyzing us? Jake said, horror spreading across his face. When Natalie called asking for $15,000, I continued. I had already anticipated the request. The timing matched your payment schedules and cash flow projections. You planned to refuse, he said. You ordered me to pack my bags and never return, I replied calmly. Did you truly believe there would be no consequences for that? I placed another set of documents on the table. The banking community in Scottsdale is small. Margaret Walsh, David Adams, Sarah Morrison, all former clients of mine. Jake stood abruptly. You blacklisted us. I shared legitimate concerns about risk and reliability. I said, everything discussed was publicly available information. You destroyed our loan applications. I provided professional insight to colleagues making responsible decisions. Natalie looked at me like she no longer recognized her father. Dad, what are you saying? I am saying Desert Vista construction was already unstable, I replied. Before I raised workplace safety concerns with Bob Henley at City Planning. And then I stopped. Because now, they finally understood. Your permits were already questionable, I said evenly. Your insurance premiums were late. And your safety procedures required review. Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. You got me fired. I made sure regulators had full visibility into potential public safety risks, I replied. What happened afterward was the natural result of your company's own failures. I reached for the final document. My handwritten timeline. Dates. Decisions. Calls made. Calls ignored. Every coincidence aligned with precision. You planned all of this? Natalie asked, her voice breaking. From the moment Jake told me to pack my suitcases and disappear, I said calmly. I spent 35 years identifying financial vulnerabilities and pressure points. Applying that knowledge here was simply disciplined execution. Jake lunged forward and grabbed the papers. You manipulative old. Careful, I warned, my voice sharp with steel. You are still standing in my house asking for my help." He froze. His hands trembled as he read the notes. The structure, the sequencing, the deliberate narrowing of their options. "You destroyed our marriage," Natalie said. The accusation hung heavy in the air. "Your marriage became collateral," I replied. "The objective was accountability for behavior that crossed every moral boundary." "We are your family," she cried. "Family does not tell someone who gave 38 years of loyalty and sacrifice to disappear," I said quietly. "You redefined this relationship that Sunday night." Natalie sank back into the couch, overwhelmed by the scale of what she was finally seeing. "How could you do this to your own daughter?" she asked. "How could you sit silently while your husband ordered me out of my own home?" I replied. Jake hurled the papers across the room, scattering months of careful documentation. "You are a monster." "I am a professional," I said calmly. "You threatened someone you believed was defenseless. You discovered otherwise." Silence filled the room except for Natalie's quiet sobbing. They were beginning to understand what it meant to be completely outmaneuvered. I returned to my chair, composed, settled, finished. "Now," I said, "shall we discuss the terms under which I might consider helping you?" Jake gathered the scattered papers with shaking hands. Rage burned in his face, but necessity kept it contained. Natalie remained collapsed on the couch, staring at the floor. "These are my conditions," I said. "You came asking for assistance. Let us handle it correctly." "Conditions?" Natalie whispered. "You told me to pack my belongings and vanish," I said. "Now you need my help to survive. That requires acknowledging some new realities." Jake looked up, hatred flashing in his eyes. "What do you want?" "First," I said, "a written apology. Public. You will acknowledge that your treatment of me was cruel and inappropriate. It will be submitted to the neighborhood newsletter and posted on social media." "You want to humiliate us," Jake snapped. "I want the truth corrected," I replied. "Your neighbors witnessed you disrespect a grieving widower. They deserve to know you recognize that behavior as unacceptable." Natalie nodded slowly. "We will write it. Second," I continued, "you will treat me with respect befitting the family patriarch. No dismissive language. No assumptions about my money. No instructions about my living arrangements." "Yes, Frank," Jake muttered through clenched teeth. "Third," I said, "any financial support comes with oversight. You will follow my guidance, attend marriage counseling, and maintain employment I approve." "You want control over our lives," Jake said bitterly. "I want to ensure my resources are not wasted on people who refuse to learn," I replied. I stood, walked to my desk, and opened my checkbook. The scratch of pen on paper was the only sound in the room. "I am prepared to provide $25,000, I said, tearing out the check and setting it on the table. "Enough to stop foreclosure and give you room to rebuild properly." Natalie's eyes widened. "But we need 40 to be fully current. You need to understand the difference between rescue and support," I said. "I am preventing collapse, not restoring the lifestyle that destroyed you." I slid the check forward. "This comes with full transparency. Monthly reports, counseling attendance, employment verification, respectful communication." Jake stared at the check like it was both poison and oxygen. "And if we refuse," he asked, "then you leave my home and solve your problems without me." The silence stretched long and heavy. They weighed pride against survival. Finally, Natalie spoke. "We accept. All of it." Jake's jaw tightened like he was chewing broken glass. Then he nodded. "Yes, we accept." "Good," I said. I picked up the check and held it just out of reach. "You will receive this tomorrow after the public apology is written and submitted." I walked them to the door. Their defeated posture bore no resemblance to the arrogance they had shown 2 weeks earlier. "One last thing," I said as they stepped onto the porch. "You mistook grief for weakness, kindness for stupidity, patience for powerlessness." Jake turned back, fury twisting his face. "This is not over." "You are right," I said calmly. "It is just beginning, under new management." I closed the door, Later, in my study, I gathered the scattered documents and placed them neatly back into the folder. Outside, their car drove away, carrying two people who had learned that cruelty carries consequences. I picked up Emily's photograph and smiled softly. "I think you would be proud," I told her. They wanted me gone. I was still here. And now they finally understood who they were dealing with. The house settled into a quiet, peaceful stillness. Justice, I learned, is best served with precision.